Peter and I in particular used to play together. We used to play old soul numbers in the main, Otis Redding stuff, Wilson Pickett, things like Benny King. And I don't know, I always thought Pete had a great voice for that kind of material. And he always wanted to play the piano as well, actually, but I managed to get the first, so I did that.
Am I very wrong to hide behind the glare from an open mind and stare?
There was a strange character called Peter Gabriel, who was a very placid, very, very ordinary, very quite normal chap who would just suddenly jump on tables and start singing, which is quite out of character. He was a drummer, in fact, to start with. People don't realise this, but in fact, he lent the anon of our first. He used to let us borrow his drums, and he used to come along and look extremely nervous.
My drums were my pride and joy, when I was a teenager. It's very strange because the bass drum from that kit, I just pulled out again, and it's a small bass drum. Has a really great, very hip sound.
I was banned from playing the guitar throughout my entire career there. I'm not quite sure why. I guess maybe at that stage, pop music was a sort of a symbol for the revolution that was about to overthrow the establishment and bring the country down. It was kind of two camps, actually. Me and Ant and Tony and Peter. And we were in rival groups at one point. We were called the Anon. Tony and Peter had a group called the Garden Wall, who were a bit jazzy. And I thought we're not really kind of rock and roll. They appear a little bit twee to me.
Waiting for you.
Of the one and only Mr. Jonathan King.
Streets full of people.
We've done these song demos, of which there was really only one outstanding one, which was written by Pete Gabriel and Tony Banks. We knew Jonathan King was involved in the pop business. I mean, he'd had his big hit with Everyone's Gone to the Moon. He was a big celebrity old boy. And he came down to Charterhouse for an old boys' day, I think it was. Somebody had the idea of giving him a tape.
Everyone's gone to the moon.
I was approached by this little sprout who I'd never seen before, because you never mix with anyone like a year or two younger than you. And he gave me this tape, so I said, "Who's it by?" And he said, "Oh, they haven't got a name yet." So I listened to it foolishly, which was a mistake I would never make in these advanced years, and thought it was absolutely fabulous, because I thought the guy had a great lead voice, and they were really interesting songs. So I named them Genesis, recorded them, and I can really, I might as well leave now.
It has begun.
We got more and more involved in doing sort of slightly what you might call more typical later Genesis stuff. But he wasn't really into that, and we realised we were losing him. So Peter and I very specifically sat down one day and wrote a song tailor-made to Jonathan King's tastes, and his favourite group at the time were the Bee Gees, so we wrote a sort of Bee Gee pastiche song, which was called The Silent Sun, and he loved it.
The silent sun that never shines. She is the warmth of my lonely heart.
So I did my best Robin Gibb impersonation on one of the demo tapes, and that allowed us through to the next leg, where we thought we could get into the studio. It was also exciting at that point, and I remember when we first saw an ad in the record mirror for Silent Sun, I cut it out and stuck it on my school books. It was a big moment.
Baby, you changed my life. I'm trying to show you.
I still believe that some of those early songs could be smash hits. The Silent Sun particularly is a gorgeous song. A lot of people in those days said it was a bit of a Bee Gees pastiche. Actually, that's totally wrong, because it was really before the Bee Gees and before the Crosby, Stills and Nash thing that they were doing this kind of sound. And I also think Peter's voice was so individual, and the lyrics were so different from anything anyone else was writing. I think if somebody else picked up some of those songs and covered them, they'd have smash hits. They are available through John Joe Music, phone number at your local BBC station.
We needed a name for The Silent Sun. We wanted to put it out as a single. No one had a good idea. Between ourselves, we couldn't agree. One comes to mind, which in fact was one of Ant's ideas, which I think tells us a little about the era, which was the Champagne Meadow. I remember that. So I'm very glad that that wasn't it.
I think I've got a soft spot for Jonathan, I think, because looking back, I mean, to make a few record now, a single or a few tracks is not a big deal. In those days, to make an album for a bunch of guys who were at school, sort of 15, 16, 17, and couldn't really play very well, to go in and get a record deal, 3 days to make the album, was actually quite an achievement.
I had this brilliant idea to call it From Genesis to Revelation and not have an artist name on it. This was a terrible mistake because it got bumped in all the religious bin of all the record shops and nobody ever heard it.
I think a lot of his influence was good. I mean, there's no doubt that some of the tracks we were doing were unwieldy and too naive, but nevertheless, I think that he wanted to turn us into too much of a poppy outfit.
In 1970, Genesis signed to Tony Stratton Smith's Charisma Records.